start with just, very broad question, as you think back over the last 3 years, if you want to talk about, how it was when first going into, what we consider to be like when the pandemic really hit the US, and just what that was like for you, how, in terms of actual experiences, or just, the feelings and just trying to work through the mental load of being, in an actual pandemic, and just what that was like starting off, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Well, myself and no one else here had any experience whatsoever with a global pandemic, and none of us had been around in 1918 when the last one kind of came around the world and killed a lot of people. So, it was an unknown, and it was because of the nature of it being a health crisis, it was a little scary for everyone. And and it was a little different from what we had experienced before, and specifically around the challenges that we experienced as an organization and a company, and as people during the great financial crisis. But there were lessons learned going through that, which was in 2009, 10, 11, and was relatively recent in our memory, and sort of in our playbook, that it became apparent to me and to the team that I work with that this probably wasn't something that was going to go away in a week. And at that point in time, we thought, hey, it's 3 months. We'll just, take some decisive action here. We'll navigate through the next 90 days, and then everything will be back to normal. So, we quickly, using the lessons learned, moved into an exercise around assessment. So what does this really mean to the world, and specifically to our industry, and the US, and specifically, and then what does it mean to our company? Then to mitigation, what steps can we take and are appropriate to take at this time to mitigate the impact of this pandemic on our people and our business, with the goal being to survive as a business, and then eventually to thrive again. And then the third component of that exercise was to pivot as quickly as possible into recovery, to identify where there were opportunities from a business perspective, from a people perspective, from an enterprise perspective. So we moved through that relatively quickly, and unfortunately, what that resulted in was what we thought was a temporary layoff of roughly 2/3 of our workforce. We never envisioned that we would have 20-year employees and team members who we would not see again for years. And so it was a tough situation. And I think those first days, and even as you look through, and we look through the first year, I think there was a lot of adrenaline associated with that. There was a lot of learning and changes, whether it was from the federal government or the state government or the local municipalities, and how each and every one of them was reacting and what it meant to us. And so whether it was, 3 times a week doing Teams calls to determine what was happening and what we were going to do, and putting action plans in place, I think that we moved through that, and that adrenaline kind of kept us going for, the first 9 months to a year. And then, as we settled into what was then sort of a reality, was that it wasn't going away. I think it really started to take a toll on the organization, and particularly with the associates that were temporarily laid off with us. So year 2 was that after the first 9 months, it became a lot different. The adrenaline was kind of gone, and everyone was a little tired. And then the reality of this not being quite as dramatic a V-shaped recovery as we thought it was going to be, and maybe looking a little bit more like a U with 24 months at the bottom instead of 90 days at the bottom. When that started to settle in, I think it was difficult, and it was difficult as a leader of an organization that had 2/3 of our what were very loyal team members who we had spent tremendous amount of time in years training and in a lot of levels becoming friends with, that they weren't coming back anytime soon. And so I think from there it kind of moved into a time for reflection.
So I want to go back to something you had mentioned. Everyone went into like having an idea of, like, oh, we may have these like 2-week kind of lockdown things just to try to flatten the curve, if you remember that phrase. And like, okay, we just trying to keep hospitals from being overwhelmed with cases. So it's like, okay, we'll do, every now and then we'll have like 2 weeks off kind of thing. And then that first 2 weeks stretched into 3 and then 4. And then, I mean, for you, personally, and then as you look to, your executive team working with them, what was that realization like of, oh, this is not going to go away as quickly as we thought it was going to?
Yeah, I think that the difference between sort of what we had experienced in the past, and the great financial crisis was a difficult time for us, right? And it was a difficult time for our industry and for our businesses, and there were a lot of issues there, but they were more financial in nature, and this one had a health issue to it, right? And people were dying, right? And people we knew were getting sick, and those kind of that's a little bit different than working it out with a lender or restructuring your debt or whatever it is that we went through before. So the concerns were at a much deeper level, on a personal level also too. Like, what did it mean to me and to my family, and that I was coming into an office every day? Was I potentially exposing others at home and here? And so all those considerations and concerns on a personal level and on a professional level were very different than anything we'd experienced before. And quite frankly, they were pretty difficult to deal with, and particularly around the balancing of the needs of a company and your personal needs, right? And when your personal need is to stay healthy, not to die like others were, it causes a deeper level of reflection about what's really important and what isn't, and how important family is and health is, and how it doesn't matter if a business survives if you don't. So all those things were sort of at the core of that. So unique.
So as you talk about this, the self-reflection, as you talk about taking another look at your priorities, how do you feel that has changed you over the last 3 years? Do you feel you are the same person as you were back at the beginning of 2020? Can you see like, oh, I can see over time how my thoughts on this or my approach to different scenarios has changed?
Yeah, I think that the closest that I have, and that we have as an organization with our team members, and the personal tragedies in some case that they experienced through this. And as you were saying, like when we thought it was only going to be 3 weeks, we were having town hall meetings with everybody every week. Oh, hey, here's what's happening, and we'll see you next week probably. And and then so those weekly town hall meetings ended up being like monthly, then quarterly. But then the other thing that was kind of interesting with that one also, so with those team members I would like to say that we're a extremely associate and team member focused organization prior to the pandemic, but I don't know that our empathy, personally, and then as an organization, that our empathy was at a level that it is today and coming out of the pandemic, and the deeper consideration of our associates and with their needs and how to really balance those with the needs of an organization or a hotel or a guest and all that kind of stuff. And again, I think it's no secret in this industry that the associates and their interaction with the guests are a key success factor, if not the key success factor. But I don't know that I was as empathetic as I am now. So the other thing that was super interesting too is that again, we believed we had a great organization and we had lots of long-term employees. It's a little a little bit of a slap in the face of reality when you go to tell them all like, oh, hey, so we love you, it's time to come back, and they're like, we don't want to come back with you. We thought about things as well, and our consideration and factors are different, and you no longer factor into them, and that was a bit of a surprise too, and that maybe because of the way that we had to react as an industry, and when your revenue goes down by 85, 90%, it causes you to make very difficult decisions as the leader of that organization, ultimately with the survival of the organization, and then the growth again. But to find out that people who had been with us for a long time no longer wanted to be with us was a little bit of a surprise learning is also.
Yeah, I mean that's something I've heard you speak about before, just the whole broken trust thing with associates across the industry. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go further. Like you just spoke about having greater empathy for employees overall and especially for the associates, but between the self-reflection plus the former associates not necessarily wanting to come back, how has that led you forward in leading a management company now? How has that influenced your leadership style now as you have these things that you're carrying with you?
Yeah, I think there are. So first of all, we're probably more open-minded than we have ever been. We are less locked into processes and procedures and policies in the way that we were before, and are much more open to finding new ways to do things that accomplish our goal from a business perspective, but also accomplish a goal from a associate perspective as well. And that flexibility is key, that not only empathy, but demonstrating empathy is extremely important. That we, it's interesting. We via Isha, who's on this call, we are very focused on wellness now, and the wellness of our associates. It's a genuine care and a genuine focus on it. And we now have communication with our associates, regularly pushing out communication around mental health and financial well-being and physical well-being. So it's things around different types of help that we offer now, financial counseling, because it's a big component, particularly after what a lot of our associates experienced with some financial insecurity over that time period, that we didn't have sufficient hours or any hours. That mental health and is critical, and I don't know that it was ever at the forefront of any workplace, and I know that it wasn't, generally in ours. It was more, like, hey, come in and be happy and meet our guests and get great guest satisfaction scores and go home. But so we're more empathetic, we're more sympathetic, we're actually more proactive in engaging with our associates on mental health, on physical health, and on financial health, knowing that those three things are critical to them and their life, and then also to their wanting to be with us.
Taking a broader view, when you think about how the industry has had to react and had to adapt over the last 3 years, what do you think the net effect is of the pandemic and the recovery on both your business and the industry overall?
Yeah, I think there are two things there. That flexibility and the need to be flexible is more important than ever. And we came out of the pandemic from a health perspective, but our industry has not recovered from an employment standpoint, right? And you just look at even though hospitality has been leading the way in hires and net hires for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we're still short a couple of million people. There's fewer than one employee available for every 2 jobs that we have, and so I don't think that it's the right thing to do, and it's also a business need to be flexible. And at the end of the day, does it matter when a room is clean, as long as it's cleaned just before the guest gets there? So it could be at 9 o'clock at night, it could be at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's okay. We can have flexible hours around that. And the other thing I think that sort of came out of this that is forever a change with us is that the rate at which our industry adopted technology in that 12 to 24 month period of time, and say from March 2020 through the end of 2021, was probably at a rate that we had adopted it at 10 years prior to that, right? And so when you look at the way that, and some of it, and a lot of it was guest driven, right? Like, hey, I want to be in your hotel, I need to be in your hotel, but I really don't want to come to your front desk to check in. Like, can you get me a decent mobile app? I want to check in with that. I want to use a mobile key. I want to text you or have some kind of digital means of communication with you when I'm in the hotel, and QR codes are okay. And so I think our rate of adoption of technology, and you look at robotics and artificial intelligence and the other things that are coming into play and have over the last couple of years, and the adoption rate of those, not only by us, but by our guests, and to a large degree driven by our guests, I think are sort of the two really big permanent changes that are coming out of COVID.
Looking at where the industry is now and where it's headed, how do you think the industry has improved as a result of the pandemic? What's better about it now because of what it's gone through?
I don't think there's anything that was worth that. So, to be candid, we are from a like an owner perspective, when you lose a year and a half of revenue essentially, and you have forborne principal and interest and FF&E reserves and all that kind of stuff, and you then have a need to catch up on that, plus meet your current obligations. It's a lot, and so it's still a tough road, and even though at the end of last year Q4 and then going into this year, the numbers exceeded 19, and 19 being the previous best year that we have ever had as an industry, at least in the US. There's still a little ways to go. And when you look at the disconnect between the fundamentals of the performance of the hotels at sort of, the peak and exceeding the best ever, and then the disconnect with capital markets and the debt markets and maturities and rate cap expirations and all those things that are still coming. I think we're a little ways away from being able to really look back and reflect, because we're kind of still in the fight on that side. But I would say the brands probably were more owner focused than they ever had, realizing that as a franchisor, if you don't have franchisees, it's your business model isn't as great, right? And so I think that our experience through 2020, 2021 with the brands has been that there is more of a partnership there than there has ever been, that their understanding of the needs of an owner and the relationship between those owners and their success is while it was always known, is probably a little more deeply felt and understood at this point. And so I think that's probably a partnership and an approach that is not going to that's different than it was going in, and I think to the positive, and will remain that way for a while. So I don't, the amenity creep that we had in 2017, 18, 19, because things were better. So like give more, and I think that their approach has been more in a partnership approach, and that it's more considered around profit versus just top line, and the fees that come off the top line.
Right. That generally covers everything I was looking to go over here, but is there anything else that you would like to share, just in terms of, changes within your own company, within your leadership style, related to the, 3 years on now, that you'd like to share that we didn't cover? Please go ahead.
I think it's interesting, and we have 4 core values as a company, and the first one is respect, and it's around respect for one another, and it's respect for our guests and for our business partners, whether it be the brands or our vendors, and that extends into the communities, respect for the communities in which we do business, and always wanting to give back and be a part of those communities of the planet. Then the second one is teamwork, and we firmly believe that the best ideas are those that come from a diverse set of perspectives from each and every one of our associates, and that when we all work together, the outcome is better than if it was just one of us. Entrepreneurial spirit, we pre-pandemic always wanted to try new things and thought of ourselves as a relatively innovative company, and then driven, people who understand goals and achievement of goals and are driven and bring some passion into the workplace. And I know that those are those values specifically, and that the team members within our company that embody those are what got us through the pandemic. And we were fortunate in that we made a decision relatively early on when we were that we were not going to eliminate positions in our above property structure. Again, we thought it was going to be 30 days, so we didn't want to have everybody gone and then come back. It ended up being a year or two, but I think, we were fortunate to have our team together, so we recovered very quickly. And I think those values served us well, particularly in that pandemic, and continue to serve us well now as we recover, and particularly around teamwork, entrepreneurial spirit, and respect. So, yeah, I think I got to care about our employees, got to be open-minded, got to be flexible. Have to really it's got to be intrinsic, your empathy. It just can't be extrinsic. Those kind of things don't work anymore. And good benefits, listen to our associates and what they're telling us, and hire, train, and retain great employees. I think that's sort of our goal coming out of this.